Chapter 6, in which Katie of Koriko causes havoc to Constance Malchance. Todd and Audrey Pratchett, with their new friend, walked and walked and walked. At last, dead tired, they came to the house where Mrs. Pratchett is waiting for them. "I'm so glad you came," she said. "We'll be making dinner for both you and your grandparents in a few minutes. Who's your friend?" "This is Katie," Todd said. "She moved in from Koriko."
"You're so beautiful,"
Katie said. "Thank you," Mrs. Pratchett smiled. "I guess we won't mind having you here before you head home to your parents. Want something to eat?"
"I just ate this afternoon, and I'm already full."
Mrs. Pratchett stood aside to make room for their visitor and her children to pass her in the doorway, saying, "If you change your mind, you let me know. Why don't you head to the living room and mingle?" She closed the front door and went to the kitchen, while the children head inside the living room. Todd whispers in Katie's ear, "Please be confident when you're with them." Looking around, she can see the grandparents becoming nervous at the sight of her. "Shay, who are you?" Grandpa Jack asked. "This is Katie," Todd introduced her. "She must be new to our neighborhood, does she?" "Of course. She moved here from Koriko."
"Say, why is your hair as pink as cotton candy?"
Grandma Eileen said.
"Why are your eyes pink as well?"
Grandma Eliza asked.
"You see? I inherit them from my parents,"
Katie said.
"I ask you, do these even bother you at the slightest? You must know that I was born like this."
Grandpa Jack smiled and said, "My dear girl, anyone with an impossible hair and eye color is always welcome to the Pratchetts. A friend of our children is a friend of ours." Grandpa David, who was sleeping heavily, was awake when Grandma Eliza shook him.
"Why must you always disturb my sleep?"
He barked.
"Don't you know we have a visitor?"
Grandma Eliza said.
"Our grandchildren has made a friend before the summer."
"And I see that you look pretty in one of my granddaughter's dresses, Katie," Grandpa Jack said. Katie blushed and purred. "I'm glad you noticed," Audrey said. "We brought her here before we head to the city." "You both brought her here before? I mean, we're so old we never pay any attention." Mr. Pratchett came into the living room. He had heard of their visitor from his wife. "So you're Katie, huh?" he said. "I guess we wouldn't mind letting you visit here. After all, I'm glad my children has made a friend for once in their lives."
"Does your children have any friends?"
Katie asked. He shook his head. "No, they don't."
"Then it looks like I'm the first."
"Quite so. Now, if you are hungry, tonight we'll be having some gourmet herring and pumpkin pot pie."
"Herring pie!"
Audrey squeaked. "Don't get overexcited," Mr. Pratchett smiled. "It'll be done in 40 minutes and 20 minutes to cool a bit." Then he heads to the kitchen. "If there's heaven on a dish, it has to be herring pie," Grandpa Jack stated.
"Does it have sugar?"
Katie said. "Sugar, you say? Absurd nonsense. You won't find any sugar, but the pie can satisfy you good the moment you take just one bite."
"If it has no sugar, then I don't want it."
"Why would you prefer sugar in a herring pie?"
"Because I only eat something sweet. I never take no for an answer. Those who say no shall have their toenails grown in or their hair falling off."
Grandpa Jack shrugged. "So you're telling me that you only eat something sweet and nothing else? No fruits or vegetables, meat or fish, cheese or pasta? Guess there's no purpose in arguing with you further, just as long as you have something to eat. We'll be having dessert later." Mr. Pratchett came back into the room. "You'll be visiting your neighbor, Mrs. Malchance, tomorrow after school. I expect you two to be on your best behavior."
"If Todd and Audrey can go, then I will join them,"
Katie said. "You?" he asked. "Do you even know her?"
"Todd and Audrey told me about her."
"I'm glad they did, but she doesn't expect to meet any new faces, especially children."
"She doesn't really hurt them if they were bad, does she?"
"She will do worse. If you're coming with my children, I think you behave as well, won't you? Don't worry, Dad, Todd said. I'll tell Katie every step of the way. Do you want some herring pie, Katie? Mr. Pratchett asked. Katie said she doesn't want any, Grandpa Jack said, but she may eat some dessert instead. But wouldn't that spoil your appetite? Mr. Pratchett asked her.
As long as I had something to eat,
Katie said.
What are you having for dessert?
Chocolate layer cake with vanilla frosting on top. I'll make sure we save a piece for you. There was silence for a second, and he went back to the kitchen, wondering why their visitor refused dinner. After a feast of herring and pumpkin pot pie, while Katie munches on chocolate layer cake, Todd and Audrey bring her upstairs to their room.
It's a good thing Mother and Father didn't see me, not even your grandparents,
Princess Kitty said. And it's also a good thing to lie to them about what you are, Todd said.
Is lying supposed to be wrong?
She leaned closer.
Is it wrong to lie?
It is wrong to lie, but we have to keep your identity a secret. Right now, we'll be visiting our neighbor tomorrow. I hope you still have your disguise.
Well, I wasn't planning on staying here for a while,
she said, while transforming back to normal.
But your parents are generous in letting me stay with you, even giving me some chocolate layer cake.
But please don't be boastful about yourself, he said. You just had a fat baker die of a heart attack today and make his wife a widow.
Very well. After all, friends trust each other. What about your grandparents? I heard that they believe anything you say.
Yes, but they're not looking forward to seeing you. Why don't we just sleep? Why are you going to sleep?
Your guess is as good as mine.
She then say,
I can sleep on your bed or sleep on a chair. I can sleep in your playhouse or onto a stair. I can sleep on your dresser, stocked with your clothes. I can sleep with balls of yarn if you can allow those. I can sleep in a box, no matter what size. I can sleep in the bird bath lying underneath the skies. I can sleep over here or I can sleep over there. But if you two don't know, then I don't know where. If you two don't know, then I don't know where.
You could sleep inside the bottom drawer, Audrey said. It hasn't been used. She opened the bottom drawer. Todd put an extra pillow in it. How heavy are you? He asked.
Not as heavy as you think,
Princess Kitty said, and climbed inside. Even if it looks cramped, she squeezed herself in there. Her body contorts to make her fit. Todd and Audrey wear the pajamas before heading to bed. They cannot help but hear the soft purrs coming from the bottom drawer. After school, Todd and Audrey arrive back home and find their mother and father already sitting around the beds with their 4 grandparents. Princess Kitty, under the false name of Kitty of Koriko, was beside them. As Todd and Audrey helped themselves in the kitchen, Katie and the grandparents were listening to the voice of Phineas Trout on the radio, who was halfway through a report on the dirigible Providence outside of Empire City.
The amazing thing is there's never been a dirigible this safe since 2 of them, made for the United States Navy, both end up crashing, resulting in nearly 80 deaths. Last week, the captain of this Zeppelin, Pierce Struzik, known for working at nativity lines for 15 years, has demanded new recruits to join him as the Providence crew. Only 12 of them have volunteered for this transatlantic crossing from Empire City to Gadono. Well, I think the excitement is building for the moment when the Zeppelin appears in our skies at the time of the bicentennial celebration. So, we're gonna switch to Dorothy Chandler as she reports in from World Airship Popularization Association HQ, just outside of Empire City. Safe, he said.
Grandma Eileen asked.
I hope the excitement comes to grief when it comes to flying on a balloon like that.
Stuff and nonsense, Eileen, Grandpa Jack said. You don't think that means this dirigible can be too difficult for people to be handled efficiently, do you? How great would it be to go around the world in a dirigible like the one mentioned on the radio, or on the advert?
Dirigible?
Katie asked. Yes, he smiled. They say dirigibles were like the ocean liners of the sky, with the clouds being the she. Pretty soon in the future, like the Providence, they're going to be more common. You can get to destinations faster without driving a car or sailing on an ocean liner. Like my grandchildren, the excitement must be real crazy.
You know I have an anxiety against flying, Jack,
Grandma Eileen said. You see, she has been very concerned about flying, particularly dirigibles in general, ever since the crash of the Akron 2 years ago and the Macon early this February, resulting in the deaths of 75. Those 2 incidents made her go against flying. Now, Grandpa Jack said to Kitty, don't you listen to what my Eileen said. After all, helium, the gas that has them aloft, has no risk. It doesn't explode, but it sure was expensive.
Well, that sure didn't prevent your wife from becoming a neurotic bag of nerves,
Grandpa David snapped.
You mind your tongue,
Grandma Eileen exclaimed. Mr. Pratchett appears in the room with Todd and Audrey. Katie, you'll be in Mrs. Malchance's house with my children until 7, he said. It's in front of our house on the other side of the road, so look both ways before crossing. And while we're on the subject, I need to get a few things straight before you go with the children. Firstly, keep a civil tongue in your head when you're talking to her. Second, as Malchance doesn't know anything about you since you're new, I don't want any trouble while she's here. You behave yourself like my children. And third, when a person is bad, that person has to be taught a lesson. And trust me, the lesson will be severe if you get on her nerves. Please don't be that person, he said to Todd and Audrey. I'm counting on the both of you. Please keep watch on her at all times. When the children went with Kitty outside Malchance's house, that's when Princess Kitty had a sudden, unexpected persuasion, but she kept it to herself.
How bad would she do if there's trouble?
She asked. We have to make sure there isn't, for our sake, Todd said.
Does she have something she doesn't want you to have? Sweets she doesn't want to share with you?
There's her cake in her study upstairs she made 2 days ago, Audrey said. But you better not go in there, no matter how tempted, Todd warned. That'll be bad for both of us. With great anxiety on his stomach, he rings the doorbell. Inside the doorway stood Constance Malchance. Next to her feet was an evil-tempered Doberman. Chopper was his name. When Constance looked at Kitty, she said, "Fresh meat on my threshold!" When she spoke again, her voice was suddenly softer, quieter, more friendly, as she leaned towards her, smiling. But Katy knew that something wasn't right. "Would you tell me your name, my dear?"
Katie of Koriko,
she introduced.
You must be Mrs. Malchance. The children told me about you.
How unfortunate for children to make friends in times like these, Constance said. You must be new to the neighborhood, aren't you? She brought the children inside and closed the door. Katy stopped in astonishment.
What an awful place for you to live in, she said.
Why, congrats for being honest, Constance said sarcastically. Sit down. The children sat on the squashy, cracked leather sofa before her. Now, if you're new to my house, you will obey these rules while you stay here, she said. If you're well behaved, good for you. But if you misbehave, you will wish you wouldn't.
What kind of rules?
Katy asked. I was hoping you'd ask, Constance stated and pulled a notebook from the pocket of her jacket. I have the rules here. There shall be no talking, no desserts, no running around the house. You will do chores for an hour. You will start in 10 minutes. And above and beyond everything, no funny business of any kind. There was a brief silence. Any questions? She asked.
No,
Katy said. That's what I thought, Constance growled. I won't have this mamby-pamby wishy-washy nonsense in my house. And I don't care if you're new, to be honest. But in my house, you better respect the rules. You've been warned. After the neighbor left, Princess Kitty said to the children, narrowing her pink eyes,
"These rules will not be tolerated, Pratchett's. There isn't a sane person in this house who think these rules are unfair. Respecting her rules? Does she really think she has power over me? Well, in my kingdom, there are no rules. Therefore, her rules mean nothing to me."
"It's best not to say things like that when you're in our house, Kitty," Todd said. "This place isn't like KAWAII Wonderland where you're from."
"What will you two be doing in 10 minutes?
"Weeds to pull, wood to chop," he stated.
"Laundry to wash, frames to dust,"
Audrey said. "Scrubbing her jalopy till it shines like the top of City Hall in Empire City," he said. Princess Kitty asked,
"And do you happen to have time for a break?"
"Hardly. Sometimes we work until we drop dead." Then she began to scratch at one of her ears.
"Would you two kindly massage both my ears? I don't think I can massage them properly myself."
"If we do that?"
"I'll help the both of you with your chores."
"Okay, we've got a deal."
"Todd, you hold one ear, and Audrey will hold the other."
Todd and Audrey did just that.
"A bit tighter."
"We'll be careful not to pull your ears by accident," Todd promised. He remembered what happened when he and Audrey are in the bakery stall where Princess Kitty and Luigi compete in an eating contest, only for Luigi to suffer a heart attack and died. But that's what she wanted them to do. So she abruptly jerks her head forward and feel both her ears getting tugged. Before the children knew it, they froze and let go of her ears. Their eyes sparkle. You see, Mr. Pratchett had accidentally given her a practical advice she could use. He meant to say, when a child is bad, but instead he said, when a person is bad. And that person could be anyone, even grown-ups. Thereby, it introduced a revolutionary idea, that children could punish grown-ups, only when they deserved it, of course. And what grown-up who deserved more is Constance Malchance. Now, while Constance was outside in her garden, Princess Kitty went upstairs to a locked door in the front of the hall. It was her private study. She took a deep breath and deeply focused on the door. She momentarily has cat ears sprouted from her hair as her tail grows long from behind. Eventually, she managed to unlock the door. The cat ears and tail vanish. Without hesitation, she went inside. The study looks old and small. Rich and fluffy rugs lay on the darkly stained floorboards. The texture on the wood long lost after years of varnishing. Numerous fine paintings were lit up by a ceiling lamp. On the tea tray lies an enormous round chocolate cake. The cake was 18 inches in diameter, and it was covered with dark brown chocolate icing. Her eyes sparkle upon sight of the gigantic cake.
"Oh, my ears and whiskers! How delicious that will be!"
she said.
"If this cake meant for Malchance and not for the children, now it's all for me, every bit of it."
Very gingerly, she began to cut a thin slice of the vast cake with a knife next to it. Then she levered the slice out. She put down the knife and took the sticky thing in her fingers and started very slowly to eat it. In 30 seconds, she finished the slice. Her pink eyes sparkle brighter as her mouth drools.
More!"
she purred. She cuts another slice and begins to eat it. When Constance heads back inside her house, she saw the children standing there and said, "Since you two have nothing else to do, you're gonna tidy this place until it shines like the tallest building in Empire City. And if you skip the corners, there will be no lunch." Todd looked at her with sparkling eyes and said,
"Meow."
"Meow?" she asked. "What's with you talking like a cat?"
"Meow."
She whacked him on the head with a rolled-up newspaper she was holding. As a result, he was no longer in a trance. Before he could do anything, she grabs him by his shirt collar, pulling him close until their faces were inches apart. "Do you think I'm playing games?" she demanded. "Now you hear this! If this place doesn't shine like the tallest building in Empire City, your backside will. The same goes to your sister. You got that?" She released him, and he was in shock when he saw his little sister still in a trance, her eyes sparkle. Suddenly, Constance noticed something. "Where's your pink-haired friend?" "She wouldn't!" Todd blurted out. "She wouldn't what?" That's when she realized something and screamed, "I knew it! If I find that girl, she's gonna be in big trouble! You stay here, Todd! I'll deal with you later!" She marched out of the living room and up the stairs. That was bad, Todd thinks. That's where her cake is in. What if Kitty... He gasped and cried. "How you tricked us into pulling your ears! We'll be in big trouble for sure!" Audrey was out of her trance. "Where's Kitty?" she asked. "I know where she is," he said. "Where she's not supposed to." When Constance barged through the study, she caught sight of Katie eating away through half of the enormous cake. Constance stopped dead. Then she let out a scream of shock. Katie didn't seem to flinch, except look at her. There was chocolate on her face. "You little carbuncle!" Constance screamed. "How dare you go into my room and steal my cake!"
More!
Katie chirped. Enraged, Constance calls out her dog. "Chopper! Get over here!" Her dog came into the room, snarling. "Make a steak out of that steak thief!" she shouted. Chopper growled and barked, baring his razor-sharp teeth and closing in for the kill.
Standing up to her Princess Kitty of KAWAII Wonderland,
Katie thought to herself.
This will not be tolerated, and it must be dealt with.
Her eyes became brighter, and her white pupils reshaped into hearts. She leans forward with eyes wide open, and she gave Chopper a surprisingly intense gaze. His angry snarls immediately became frightened little whimpers as Constance watches, dumbstruck. That's what Kokoro does most of all. It ensnares the brain and manipulates the mind. That's when Chopper turns on his master and bit her on the leg. Constance screams in pain and jumps around as Katie grabs the cake and bolted down the stairs. "Get back here, you little thief!" she screamed. Princess Kitty heads back to the living room, where they find Todd and Audrey upset. "Kitty, how dare you trick us?" he said. "Do you realize how much trouble we're going to be in now, thanks to you?"
Tricked you?
She laughed.
That devil woman made a fool of me first, but them broken dreams have got to end. Want some of this cake?
Todd is about to say something, but is interrupted with Constance screams of frustration and pain. Princess Kitty went on.
You know, I now express my feelings toward the devil woman.
And it goes something like this.
Constance Malchance, nasty and vile, uptight and cranky all the while. What a life that she must live, never having a smile to give. May good prevail, as we all know, but instead she looks around with woe. She wants the world all dull and gray, so all of us are left to pray that she loses her marbles within the hour, so her world could be less sour, when she spent her life shut up in some appalling sanatorium. She seeks to rid the world of fun, and this quest will never be done until the world is purged of joy, taken from every girl and boy. Never be scared of this devil hag. The worst that she can do is nag. There's no one who can even pretend to be on her side and defend her strictest acts of discipline in a war that she can never win. Spanking children with a belt, you can't imagine the pain they felt. Being sent to bed without supper, There's no hope for a fixer-upper. Have them starve for a week can surely make their future bleak. To me, that is considered abuse, so defending her is considered obtuse. If only she could come to her senses that her actions have consequences. Hopefully she'll learn a thing or two, in gaining a far more joyful view. But if she doesn't and stays the same, she only has herself to blame and better off living in shame. And she will be forevermore as loved as a total eyesore. This spoiled, rotten battle-axe shall soon learn to face the facts. Being such a rotten devil woman, a horrid, impossible, inhuman, will make you reviled amongst everyone. Now you know what must be done. So sit back and enjoy the fun. Just get yourself something to eat and drink, and watch as I turn the world pink. Not everything has to be so bland. Be gay with the world at hand. But if you choose to ignore this plea, may God save you from your enemy, who seeks to stop your awful ways, and to damn you for the rest of your days.
Constance bursts through the living room. Chopper is still on her leg.
Get it off!
She continues screaming like mad.
Get it off my leg!
Katie said.
You got what you deserve for having a heart so black, but you can have this cake if you want it back!
She lunged forward and hurled the large, empty china platter on which half of the cake had rested onto the neighbor's face with a crash, and pieces of cake and china flew all over. Chocolate stained her entire face. Chopper, out of Katie's spell, lets go of his master's leg and scatters out of the living room. Todd and Audrey, who felt embarrassed, looked around for Katie, but she was never here. It turns out that after she hurled the cake onto Constance's face, she bolted through the back door through cat-like reflexes.
Do you really think this is funny, you brats?
Constance screamed.
But it wasn't our fault,
Todd whimpered.
Your best bet is to shut up, the both of you, she ranted. It's both your fault. Your friend humiliated me, making an ass out of me.
As they slowly backed away in fear, she already grabbed them by their sleeves.
And you two know the consequences for disobedience in this house.
Mr. Pratchett, who was mowing the grass, saw Constance with a face covered in cake with his children, as she dragged them across the road and onto the sidewalk. He dropped the lawnmower and cried, Mrs. Malchance, you let go my children! You leave them alone! I promise I can explain everything!
Don't you Mrs. Malchance me, you lowlife! She bellowed. I've refused to become a figure of ridicule and discourtesy because of your children, especially the fun of any kind. Well, let me tell you, if this, she pointed at the chocolate still on her face, is what they call fun, then fun should never exist at all. Only discipline.
That doesn't give me an excuse to drag them by their sleeves, as if they were criminals, Mr. Pratchett said.
That's because they are, she glared at Todd. Tell your father what I did to teach you and your little sister a lesson.
That made Mr. Pratchett's eyes widen in realization.
Mrs. Malchance, he whispered.
He can hear her scream at his son's face.
Tell him! Nice and loud, so he can hear!
Slowly, Mr. Pratchett can hear his son say, while he fought back tears, She spanked us real bad. The both of us with her belt. Because we were bad kids who deserved to be punished. She wouldn't have done it if we hadn't been bad.
That's right!
Constance shoved the two children in Mr. Pratchett's arms.
I've warned them too many times that as long as they visit my house, they will follow my rules. They did it. Always a disappointment to me.
What about Katie, their new friend? He asked.
Did you spank her too? I wish I did, but she got away, she said. Truth be told, the new friend your children make is horrible all along. She is no different from any bad influence. She's none other
than a vicious thief, a disgusting criminal, a denizen of the underworld, a waste of life. She promised me not to cause any trouble in your house. I promise I'll deal with that girl. Also, her parents will be notified of this. What good are your promises if you do nothing? She sneered. You think I'm oblivious of that? It's fun like this that children act this way. And it makes me infuriated of living in such a world. Mr. Pratchett's face was scarlet. Having fun or using their imagination at a young age aren't criminal offenses, Constance. You know they're just children. My son is 12 and my daughter is 8. They still have time to become civilized when they're old enough. That is no excuse, Pratchett! She screamed, dashing what little hope he had left. Children who are bad bring bad things upon themselves, just like your stupid brats. They're not too young or too stupid to know what I'm talking about. They should learn to never have fun and become civilized. That includes throwing away anything that makes them act irresponsibly. Do you understand what I am telling you? This is all fact, and the facts are all there is. You should be ashamed of yourself as a parent if you don't know that. Sometimes the facts are wrong. You really think they deserve to be spanked if they misbehave? You really think I should not have my children acting in such a manner? They're just trying so hard to be good for you! And they're not trying hard enough, Pratchett, she sneered. Right now, it's my intention to make sure they throw away everything fun, especially thinking of fun, and start growing up by the start of summer. Just as she walks off, he catches up and grabs her. Constance! Don't you dare say things like that! We're not— Without any warning, she leans back and punched him in the face, knocking him to the ground. He groaned and lifts his head to his nose, as blood slowly pours down from his nostrils. Don't you give me that look, Pratchett, she hissed. You did this to yourself. I mean what I say. Now act like a grown-up, and don't you ever raise your hand at me again, or it's one of your eyes. They will start in the morning. Am I clear? She can hear him mutter, Yes, ma'am. You better be, she glared. As he got up to his feet, she walked the other way without so much as a glance back, leaving him in shock and the children hurt. He winced as she slammed the front door. He went back and looked at his son, then at his daughter. He could see tears forming in the little girl's eyes, then starting to run down her cheeks. He actually felt sorry for the children. He honestly didn't know what to say to Audrey. But then again, he'd have a talk to his children when they calmed down in their room. He finally found his voice. Tell you what, children, why don't we just head inside, he said. We'll talk about this later once you two had calmed down, okay? That's when Audrey broke down screaming and crying. Mr. Pratchett could make out the words, It's all Kitty's fault, between her sobbing. When Mr. Pratchett saw Katie on his right, who was as disappointed as him, because she happens to hear them, he tells his son, Get your sister inside. Tell your mother and your grandparents what happened. He watched as Todd carries his sister, who continues to bawl uncontrollably, into the house. But by the time Todd heads inside, he doesn't really tell them about Princess Kitty, who was in disguise. He was too upset to do so. Katie? Mr. Pratchett calls out to Katie. Could you come here for a second? I'm not angry. I just wanted to talk to you. However, he can hear her scream, My fault! Everything is my fault! Then she turned and ran, while he calls after her. Hey! Hey, come back here! Katie, come back! Come back right now! They didn't mean it, Katie! Katie! Katie, please come back! I just want to talk to you! But she didn't come back. Neither will he go after her. She kept running toward the city until she's gone from his sight. He knew he must do something about it, and goes back inside the house.